I'm thrilled to introduce our speakers, Margo, Janie, and Alaina, for our next topic, Actuarial Dilemma, Professionalism in Question. Margo MacKenzie is a senior manager in EY's Insurance and Actuarial Advisory Services based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She has 10 years of experience as a reserving actuary for insurance and reinsurance companies, as well as corporate self-insureds. Margo is a fellow of the Casualty Actuarial Society and a member of the American Academy of Actuaries. Janie Brink is a manager in EY's Insurance and Actuarial Advisory Services practice based in Nashville, Tennessee. She has 7 years of experience as a life actuary and focuses on actuarial audits and financial reporting. Janie is a fellow of the Society of Actuaries and a member of the American Academy of Actuaries. Alaina Jerguson is a senior analyst based in New York City. After graduating from TCU, she joined EY's Insurance and Actuarial Advisory Services practice with their Actuarial Services Consulting program. Her 3 years of experience as a reserving actuary has spanned both insurance and reinsurance companies, as well as several P&C lines of business. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Emma, and thank you, NAWA, for inviting us today. We're really excited to be here to speak with everyone. So I'll go ahead and get us started. I'm going to go ahead and skip past this disclaimer slide. If you are referencing the slides later on, just give this a quick read so you've got an idea of kind of the purpose of these slides, what they were prepared for and what they were not prepared for. But I won't read through them. I'll skip through that for now. In terms of the agenda for today's presentation, we'll start with just a quick introduction of professionalism. How does that apply to us? How can we be thinking about that as actuaries? And then we'll go into a series of different case studies. So we've prepared 6 different case studies for today. There's a mix of, property and casualty and life content. And we do want this to be interactive. So we've got a series of polls using Slido throughout. So if everybody can just have their phones ready, we'll ask you to scan a QR code and then you'll be able to participate in the polls. I don't think we're going to be, I'm not sure if everybody has the ability to unmute or if, I think the team would like to keep, as Emma mentioned, everybody on mute. So when we get to the discussion portions, we will be using the chat feature. So if you've got anything that you want to share in respect to the responses that you gave to the polls, feel free to type it in the chat and we can kind of have some open discussion. Hopefully we can get through all 6 of these, but if not, we'll stick to 4 or 5. Assuming we're able to get through them all, time permitting, we'll go over a couple of professionalism resources there at the end. All right, so I'll kick it off with the introduction. First question here is, what is professionalism? So definitely a lot of different ways to define professionalism and to think about professionalism, but a couple of definitions that we found that we felt were particularly applicable to us as actuaries. First one is the competence or skill that's expected of a professional. And the second is the standards, practices, or motivations associated with a profession. Second question is, why is professionalism important? So in our day-to-day work as actuaries, whether we're property casualty, life health, reserving, pricing, whatever field it is, we're all expected to be conducting ourselves as professionals, and we're expected to uphold whatever those professional standards are of our respective countries and our respective actuarial organizations. So I think for most of us on the call today, it's probably, the American Academy of Actuaries, the CAS, the SOA, but whatever the actuarial organization is, that you're bound to, it is the expectation that we stick to those professional standards. As an example of the importance of professionalism, a reference to the Code of Professional Conduct that was published by the American Academy of Actuaries. Within that code, it requires actuaries to adhere to the high standards of conduct, practice, and qualifications of the actuarial profession, thereby supporting the actuarial profession in fulfilling its responsibility to the public. So how and when does professionalism actually apply to us as actuaries? It's easy to look at those definitions, but thinking about how that really applies in our day-to-day work is another thing. So like we mentioned, actuarial organizations typically issue their own set of either professionalism standards, maybe a code of conduct for their members. And we do have a sample of those in the resources section that we might be able to get to at the end of this. But what it really boils down to is professionalism standards apply in everything that we do as actuaries. So that's everything from decision-making to documentation, communication, really all aspects of the work that we do. We should be keeping professionalism at the forefront of our minds. So throughout the slides that we have prepared that we're going to take you through today, we've got several different scenarios that hopefully help demonstrate, some of the ways that you could face professionalism without even really thinking about it in our day-to-day role as actuaries. So again, we do want this to be interactive. If any questions come up, feel free to ping those in the chat. Hopefully everyone's able to access Slido, and hopefully this is a great interactive session. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alaina for case study number 1, which is called To Peer Review or Not to Peer Review? That is the question.
Okay, so in this case study, we have Michael, who is a P&C actuary who was hired 6 months ago by M&O Insurance Company, which is a global insurance and reinsurance writer. Michael has 8 years of prior experience working at a commercial lines insurance company where he's focused on general professional liability insurance reserving. Since joining, Michael has been focused on expanding the skill set and getting exposure to specialty and reinsurance lines. His prior experience does not include any reinsurance, but he is interested in becoming more specialized in this. Michael is a certified member of his country's actuarial organization and is approved by M&O Insurance Company to perform internal peer reviews. Charlotte, Michael's colleague, approaches him with a request for a peer review of a reserve analysis she and her team have just completed. The analysis was performed for a general liability book of business with both insurance and reinsurance segments. Charlotte informs Michael that the reserves have developed favorably during the past 5 years and that the analyses are straightforward and based on generally accepted actuarial methods. Michael has only been involved in one other reinsurance reserving analysis since joining M&O, but Charlotte says she isn't concerned about this, stating that she knows the business in and out and is extremely confident in her analysis. The reinsurance reserves only represent 15% of the total book of business, subject to this peer review, and peer reviews aren't required by their governing actuarial organization. So this is more check-in-the-box exercise to keep the chief actuary happy. And with that, our first question on Slido, it might take a second for your guys' QR codes to work, but it is Michael qualified to perform the peer review? Yes, no, or maybe?
We'll give it a few minutes for everybody's responses to come through. If you need a refresher or any reminders of the case study, I know we're going through these kind of quickly, feel free to ping in the chat and we can give a couple bullet points on the case study.
So a very common answer is maybe, which totally makes sense. A big question is to consider is what portion of the analysis, the complete analysis. If you want to justify your maybe, feel free in the chat, since it can be kind of vague.
This one's definitely a very on the fence type of thing. I think we've got a lot of conflicting opinions on this. So like Alaina said, if you're interested in giving your perspective on why you think it's a maybe, kind of why you're on the fence, why you think it's a hard no, if you chose that, or why you think it's a yes, feel free to shoot a ping in the chat. As a reminder, there are no right answers here, so we're interested in anybody's perspective. None of the answers on any of these case studies are considered right or wrong. So just looking for some discussion here if anybody's interested in sharing their perspective. Anybody from the maybe group have any reason why they didn't choose yes, why they were kind of on the fence about the yes side of things? got a couple thoughts here. Okay, so first one saying clearly qualified on primary, definitely agree with that, but not for reinsurance. Could be a lot more uncertainty. Yeah, very good. That was one of the things, you know, I think Alaina was alluding to also is, could he be qualified to review a portion of it? You know, would they be interested in having him review only a portion? Because it does raise the question, you know, how different are the reinsurance and insurance analyses? Are those types of methodologies and assumptions considered similar enough? Yeah, definitely. I personally, I think would lean towards the no for the whole book. Agree with Ellen in terms of the primary book or the insurance business. But it's, you know, it's hard to say that he's qualified for the reinsurance with no prior reinsurance experience.
And other options are assisting on the reinsurance, getting that experience under your belt, getting one other thing so that in the future, maybe you can do that.
Then we had one other response from Mike, which is also a really good response in terms of performing the initial analysis and really taking kind of the full ownership of those numbers. Yeah, definitely feels like probably a no on that one. But from a peer review perspective, maybe he could still, you know, provide some meaningful perspective, challenge things from a meaningful viewpoint. And that's another thing, you know, thinking about this one as well, that would kind of go with what Mike's saying is it also depends on, you know, what they're looking for in terms of the peer review. So if he could potentially accept the peer review, but disclose, hey, here's my experience. You know, I just want to let you know, I have plenty of insurance experience. I don't have as much reinsurance experience. To leadership or whomever, do you feel as though that's sufficient for what you need for the purposes of this peer review? Because I think peer reviews do tend to serve different purposes, you know, across different companies or, you know, different team structures. So yeah, definitely no clear right answer here. A lot of different ways you could go. Awesome. So thank you, Alaina, and thank you guys for the discussion. So with that, we've got a couple of references to the professionalism standards. Alaina, I don't know if you want to just run through some of these really quickly.
Yeah, so just a couple of them from American Academy of Actuaries include that an actuary should perform these actuarial services only when the actuary is qualified to do so on the basis of the basic and continuing education and experience. Another one in Precept 3 talks about an actuarial shall ensure that actuarial services performed by or under the direction of the actuary satisfy all the applicable standards of practice. And from the Actuarial Standards of Practice 43, we talk about that sometimes constraints exist in the performance of an actuarial analysis, such as those due to limited data, staff, like in this one, time, or other resources, where the actuary believes that such constraints create a significant risk that a more in-depth analysis would produce a material differently result. They should notify the principal of that risk and communicate the constraints of the analysis to the principal. So while it is understood that there are risks, they must be communicated.
All right, so hi everyone, I'm Janie Brink. I'm going to walk us through case study number 2 here. So this one's called, but it's immaterial, so it doesn't matter, right? Okay, so we have Adam is a life actuary who works at an actuarial consulting firm called ACF. He recently joined a new engagement to perform an annual methodology review for the life and annuity business of ABC Life. ABC recently adopted long duration targeted improvements, or LDTI, for GAAP reporting. So LDTI will be the main focus of the methodology review this year. A key part of the review is for ACF to review the components of ABC's cash flow projections to confirm that they comply with LDTI guidance. This engagement has been a big learning curve for Adam, as this is his first time working closely with LDTI, but he feels good about the work he's done reviewing the cash flow projections. ACF presented to ABC Life, and Adam's part of the presentation went great. The team did not report any material findings. After the presentation, when Adam was preparing to share the deliverables with the client, he notices that the benefit cash flows actually had maintenance expenses included. This is against the methodology, which notes that LDTI removed maintenance expenses from the reserve components. Adam reviews the size of the maintenance expenses and doesn't expect them to have a material impact on the reserve. Since the presentation already went so well and this piece seems immaterial, maybe Adam will stay quiet this year since he's new to the engagement so the team doesn't have to redo the work. He'll make a note to bring it up for next year's review. And what should Adam do? Mention it. Speak up sooner rather than later. I like that one. He needs to be transparent, to disclose it, to share the error that was made in the magnitude. He's got to come clean. All right, all really good responses here, concluding that he should speak up, which I agree with. A couple notes I had for what he could have done better next time around is that he could have better educated himself on the guidance before joining the project. He could have asked someone on his team to peer review his work before they presented to the client. He probably should confirm what the materiality threshold is before he's just automatically assuming that what he found is immaterial, and likely would need to redo the work anyways to confirm the materiality of what he found. And at the end of it, he should let his team and the client know about the error, no matter the size of it, so that they're doing the reserve calculations correctly. And I like this one here that says if he thinks it won't be material, it's okay to say that, but that they should go back and review it just to make sure. So absolutely agree with that, that if it is immaterial at the end of the day, that's great, but definitely want to actually do the work and quantify to make sure before just assuming that that's the case. All right, and then a couple of professionalism references here. So Code of Conduct, Precept 1, an actuary shall act honestly with integrity and competence and in a manner to fulfill the profession's responsibility to the public and to uphold the reputation of the actuarial profession. And Actuarial Standard of Practice number 1 on materiality being a consideration in many aspects of the actuary's work.
All right. So with that, we're going to move on to case study number 3. This one is called Friends in the Field. And for this one, Alaina and I are going to do a little skit. Bear with us. It's a little bit better when we're on a stage and able to do this side by side. So just picture us in the same room together having a conversation. So just to set the stage, Alaina is a P&C consulting actuary, and she works for AJ Consultants, which is an actuarial consulting firm. I, Margo, am a P&C actuary, and I work for MG Insurance Company. So it's a Friday night, and we decide we want to meet for dinner at one of our favorite local restaurants. We both really need some time to let off steam. It's been a really long work week. So I get there first. I open up my phone, and Alaina has texted me letting me know she's running late. I came straight from work, and I've got my laptop with me. So I figure, why not use this time to just go through a couple of files that my boss just sent over? Alaina arrives like 20 minutes later.
Sorry, I'm so late. I can't believe how crowded it is in here. Wait, why are you still working?
No, I'm not. I'm just killing some time while I waited. I was really curious when I saw an email marked urgent and confidential that came through from my boss on a Friday night.
Ugh, nerve-wracking. I must say, it really has been one of those weeks, huh?
It totally has. So what's been going on with you?
I spent the first half of the week getting over a really bad cold, and I've been so busy at work. We've been working really hard on the actuarial to try and win the actuarial opinion for ABC Insurance Company.
Wait, ABC Insurance Company. Isn't your sister the chief actuary there?
Yep, and honestly, she's pretty much told me we have it in the bag. So I shouldn't be stressing so hard. She trusts that our work will be just as good as any other firm, and she knows that winning this project could really help me get that promotion I've been working towards.
That would be awesome. I am surprised, though, that they're letting you work on the proposal when your sister's the chief actuary there.
Oh, I didn't tell them. What they don't know can't hurt them.
Oh, that's so lucky. I really hope you guys get the work.
Thanks. So what's been going on with you this week? Anything crazy? Anything exciting?
The usual. Kind of in the same boat with a really crazy work schedule right now, though. We're actually working on this really huge project.
More.
So we've really been wanting to expand our product offering more into like specialty lines of business. So we've been having discussions with XYZ insurance company about maybe a potential acquisition. It would be a huge deal for both companies.
Oh my gosh, that is big news.
I know, right? But make sure you don't tell anybody though. It's really confidential. I mean, obviously I trust you. You're a professional. You know what you can and can't do with confidential information.
Of course, it's not like I'm going to go buy or sell stock in the companies or something. I know what insider trading is.
All right. So just to summarize, again, I'm a PNC actuary working for MG Insurance Company. I'm working on a potential acquisition of another insurance company with my team. So the acquisition involves confidential information and highly sensitive information, and the acquisition itself is considered to be highly confidential. Alaina, on the other hand, is a PNC actuary working at a consulting company. She's working towards a big promotion, and she's hopeful that getting a big win in the future would help her secure that promotion. She thinks that she's probably going to secure this win at ABC Insurance Company because her sister's the chief actuary there. But she hasn't disclosed that to her employer, that she's working on this proposal and her sister's the chief actuary there. So with that, we're going to open it up to get some thoughts from you guys. So when it comes to aspects of professionalism, does anybody have any feedback or thoughts on our conversation, our general conduct, how we were conversing? Any feedback, any things that you think we could have done better or differently?
A lot of notes about
Yeah.
disclosing that her sister is the chief actuary, which I definitely agree.
This is the second time we've done this skit, and we've gotten some pretty harsh criticism both times.
I know. Confidential info in a public setting. Definitely should not be opening that email on a large laptop right in the middle of a busy restaurant.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good one. We tried to kind of secretly sneak that one in there with respect to, opening the laptop in the loud and crowded restaurant. So maybe you could argue, maybe I have a privacy screen on, but if someone's right behind me, the privacy screen isn't going to do anything. So much better safe than sorry with those types of things, particularly when we're handling such confidential and sensitive information. We hope professional actuaries are not doing this. We hope that as well. This is not based on actual experience or something that we've seen. So we're hopeful that this also isn't happening, any of these types of things. Yeah, these are all great responses. We have to say we agree. At least I do. Do you agree, Alaina?
Absolutely. I think my favorite one is leave work at work.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that.
Need better work-life balance, yes. All right, so I think responses have started rolling in. So we'll quickly flip to the next slide to just touch on some of these professionalism resources. So again, from the Code of Conduct under the American Academy of Actuaries, Precept 9 says an actuary shall not disclose to another party any confidential information unless you're authorized to do so or required to do so by law. Also, Precept 7b, an actuary shall not knowingly perform actuarial services involving an actual or potential conflict of interest, unless you've disclosed that, which obviously in this situation, Alaina had not. And then under Actuarial Standard of Practice number 23, data quality, there's also a reference to confidentiality. So the actuary should be aware that data may contain confidential information and should handle that confidential information in accordance with Precept 9. Yeah, so great discussion, great feedback. All right, and I'll hand it over to Janie to talk about AI at work.
All right, thank you. Yep, so this one's AI. Can we use AI at work? So this is something that could be applicable or a topic that is relevant for life and PNC actuaries right now. So Sue works in the life valuation department at ABC Life. The company is undergoing a confidential reinsurance transaction with XYZ Re, and Sue was asked to review and summarize the reinsurance treaty to share with her team how the transaction will impact their valuation procedures. Sue has been busy with Q3 valuation work and didn't realize the treaty is over 100 pages long. The meeting with her team is this afternoon, and she didn't leave herself enough time to do a thorough review of the reinsurance agreement. Sue's coworkers have been telling her all about the wonders of AI and how helpful it can be, but she's mostly brushed it off and hasn't tried it out yet. However, this seems like a perfect opportunity to use the new technology since she's short on time. Nearly everyone uses a search engine at work all the time. This really isn't any different, right? Sue searches for a generative AI platform on the internet and uploads the reinsurance agreement to the site. She asks AI to summarize the main points of the treaty. The platform provides a summary that is exactly what she wanted, and Sue is amazed at how quickly this worked. Now she can present to her team on time. After presenting, Sue mentions that she finally tried AI and used it to help create the reinsurance summary for the meeting. Her manager asks what interface she used and if it was an open AI versus closed AI platform. If she used an open AI platform, that means the details of the reinsurance agreement are now publicly available. Sue doesn't know the difference between open versus closed AI, and now she's worried that she's made a mistake using AI at work. Do you have any concerns around Sue's use of AI? What could she have done differently at work? Big yikes. Plan ahead. Use internal AI if the company has one. Should not use it for the first time on something so important. Talk to IT to use an approved AI tool. Don't use AI for any client data. All right, a lot of good feedback here. Don't use tools you don't understand. Ask for more time to prepare. These are all great. And just to share a couple things I had noted as well, number one being to educate herself on the different types of AI. So in this scenario, she likely pulled up a ChatGPT free or something similar where that platform is training on anything that's put into it. She should have checked if her company has its own AI platform or just more generally checked what her company's policy is on AI use. And then I think another point is that she did not do any review of what the AI platform put out. So since it's still such a new technology, regardless, she should have reviewed what AI spit out in terms of the summary and compared it to the actual treaty to make sure that what came out actually made sense. So definitely a big no-no. So a lot of good feedback here. Her company should have provided training. I like that one. Yep. AI won't necessarily get it right. I agree with all these. All right, and a couple references here. So precept 9 of the Code of Conduct, an actuary shall not disclose to another party any confidential information unless authorized to do so by the principal or required to do so by law. And Actuarial Standard of Practice number 23 on data quality, confidentiality. The actuary should be aware that data may contain confidential information. Such confidential information should be handled consistent with precept 9 of the Code of Conduct.
All right, so on to case study number 5, which is called Under Pressure. So in this one, we're going to have 2 sets of polls. So we'll have one poll and then we'll do the second half of the case study. So in this situation, Andrew is a reserving actuary. He works for BCD Insurance Company, and he's currently working through his year-end reserving analysis. So in his analysis, he saw pretty significant adverse loss development since the prior year end. A lot of this coming from, unfortunately, the general liability lines of business. Because of this adverse development, Andrew does indicate significant prior year development in his estimates. Andrew knows that the wider insurance industry has also been experiencing similar challenges across the liability lines because of inflationary pressures, and he expects that that will help him support his assumptions and the adverse prior year development that he's indicating in his discussions with the leadership team at his company. When he shares his results and the initial observations with the CFO, whose name is Hannah, she informs Andrew that there's been a recent strengthening in case reserves that must be the driver of the higher than expected loss development. Hannah asks Andrew to go back and take another look and make sure that he's comfortable with his indications now that she's shared this case reserve strengthening with him. So in this scenario, what should Andrew do with the information that Hannah just shared with him? Should he go back to his analysis and revisit his assumptions and try to bring those estimates down? Obviously Hannah said there was strengthening in case reserves, so there's probably no need to react. Should he consider revisiting his analysis, but first discuss with the claims team to get a better understanding of what Hannah's explaining and get some more evidence to support that case reserve strengthening? Should he stick to his current analysis indications without talking to claims or without taking a second look or making any changes? Should he report Hannah to HR because the request is unprofessional? Or are there any other thoughts on what Andrew should do? I'll go to the next slide to see how responses are coming in. If you do choose other, feel free to shoot us a message in the chat on what you think another course of action could be. So we do have an other. So if anybody is comfortable giving their thoughts on what they think another course of action could be, we're certainly interested in hearing that. And remember, there are no right answers here. All right, so Drew in the chat said, it seems likely to me that the reason the case reserves are being strengthened is the change in environment. Yeah, definitely a possibility. So it sounds like most people, based on the response to the poll, think that he could consider revisiting his analysis, but that he should discuss with claims first to get a better understanding. And I definitely think that that kind of supports what Drew pinged in the chat. Not at all, in from my perspective, unreasonable to consider what Hannah shared with him and consider revising the analysis. But assuming the conversation with Hannah was very short and she simply said, hey, there's been strengthening in case reserves, and didn't give him further information, which she probably doesn't necessarily have all the details on, not being on the claims team, definitely would be difficult to make those changes comfortably. And with professional standards in mind, without getting the discussion from claims, getting some more documentation, really getting an understanding of why have the case reserve strengthened. Is it a one-time thing? Is it across the board? Is it certain years, presumably impacting this line of business, but is it certain lines of business? So again, it seems like the overwhelming majority think that he should discuss with claims first before revisiting his analysis, which is what I would tend to do as well. Looking at the chat now, going from the bottom to the top, there is one wrong answer. Yeah, I would agree. I don't see Hannah's request as it stands as unprofessional. So I think going to HR would be a little bit extreme, probably a waste of Andrew's time because I don't know that they do much with that. So I don't disagree. There might be a wrong answer on this page. Rose said, looking at reserve tests, different metrics and diagnostics, absolutely. Even, after talking to claims, would want to look at those types of things to understand, is the data supporting that as well? Totally agree with that. Yep. And then Alicia said an analysis to see if he can confirm the case reserve adequacy. Absolutely agree. Kind of in line with what Rose said. And same thing for Ellen. So yeah, absolutely agree. Again, yeah, talk to claims and also further, maybe that falls under the other, would probably want to do some testing of your own just to make sure that, that Andrew could support his own estimates, not just with what he's hearing from claims, but also from what he's seeing in the data. All right. So continuing on, So Andrew decides to go with what the majority of the group suggested, and he decides to have a discussion with claims. And the claims team does represent that they're working on an initiative to strengthen case reserves, but they don't have any evidence to really provide him to support that claim. He also took another look at his analysis, like some of you suggested, and he reviewed certain key diagnostics, and he didn't see any sort of quantitative evidence to support a strengthening in case reserves. So Andrew goes back to have a follow-up discussion with Hannah to share his findings and his observations. And Hannah argues, just because you don't see it in the data yet doesn't mean it's not real. She also insists the claim initiative is having an impact on the indication, and she gently reminds Andrew that employee bonuses are dependent upon the outcome of his reserve analysis. Now, what should Andrew do in this situation? So should he revisit his analysis and maintain his prior year-end estimates? Again, justifying that the latest calendar year of data isn't reliable because of the case reserve strengthening. He can just use his conversation with claims as corroborating evidence for that. So hold his estimates, not react to what he saw in the latest year. Should he revisit the analysis and adjust his assumptions to reduce the reserve estimate from the prior year? But with this, he could increase his range width so that his original estimate is encompassed in his range. If his range is still including what he thinks is the best estimate, is that fair? That satisfies Hannah's request, but also gets his best estimate within that range. Should he stick to his current analysis indications and discuss the situation at the next audit committee meeting, with the logic that this would represent undue pressure from management and that it's something that needs to be raised to the audit committee? Should he resign from BCD? And are there any other thoughts on what he should do, should or could do in this situation? And again, if you have any thoughts, please feel free to put those into the chat. I think we had some really good discussion on the first piece of this. Yes, Sharon definitely was hoping this would come up at some point during our discussion of these slides, because we haven't touched on the ABCD yet. But and I think some people may not think at the onset, because it's the CFO, she's not necessarily subject to actuarial standards. But the ABCD is for more than just the discipline piece of that. So it's not necessarily looking for discipline for Hannah. It's more looking for guidance for Andrew. So yeah, very, very good recommendation. Yeah, Sharon and Rose, I see. And it sounds like, Rose, you've gone to the ABCD before and that they were really, really helpful. We've heard that from some others who've gone to the ABCD as well. And that it wasn't something where, as soon as you go to them, they're going to chase after, this actuary and try to discipline them. You can go to them to get their perspective and get their guidance. Okay, and there's something in the chat about meeting with Hannah, claims, and Andrew. That's a good idea too. Yeah, just get everybody in the same, an open dialogue to get kind of everybody on the same page about the changes. Very good idea. And Ellen, yes, not a bad idea. Even if he doesn't immediately resign from BCD, it doesn't feel like where you're getting that kind of undue pressure from management might not be the best fit for a healthy working environment. So Bill is clarifying requests for guidance versus filing complaints with the ABCD. So yeah, that's great. This would definitely be a situation where I think requesting guidance would be very, very helpful. So it sounds like the majority of people, based on the poll, think he should stick to his current indications that he was comfortable with. Doesn't really feel like there is any evidence to support that case reserve strengthening, and that he needs to bring that up during the next audit committee meeting. Yep. And another thought, very true. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing. Could certainly, make revisions to his range, which I think we have on, I guess it's the fourth bullet point here now. So definitely something you consider alongside sticking with your current best estimate. If you think there's been some case reserve strengthening, maybe there's a greater potential for reserves to, go further down to the low end. All right, and just a couple professionalism references. I won't read through the first two because I think we've already mentioned these. There's a lot of overlap between these case studies, but again, from the Code of Conduct, both Precepts 1 and Precept 7A apply here. And then Actuarial Standard of Practice number 41, Actuarial Communications. This is around conflict of interest. So an actuary who's not financially, organizationally, or otherwise independent concerning any matter related to the subject of an actuarial communication should disclose any pertinent information that's not apparent. So this includes any situation where the actuary acts or may appear to be acting as an advocate. Applicable financial disclosure is limited in accordance with Precept 6. So again, this is with respect to Hannah bringing up that bonuses could be impacted by his indication. There's obviously a financial incentive for him there, which would present, in a sense, a conflict of interest. And then, like a couple of you already brought up, the ABCD consultation would be a really good resource in this situation. All right, so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Alaina for our last case study called The Price is Right, Maybe.
Awesome. So in this case study, we have Olivia, who is the lead pricing actuary for XO Reinsurance Company and is working on the pricing analysis for the upcoming January 1st renewals. About halfway through her analysis, though, she uncovers an error in the data. As a result of a formula error within the model she recently implemented, there has been a miscalculation of claims between business segments, such that certain excessive loss claims have been misclassified as quota share claims. Olivia is able to verify that all of the claims data is being captured despite the error in classification by type of business. Since the analysis is still in progress and there is some wiggle room in the timeline, Olivia asks her team to update the analysis using the corrected data. Once the team has completed the updates, Olivia is relieved to find that the data error did not have a material impact on the initial pricing indications. However, that relief is short-lived, as Olivia quickly realizes that the error is likely to have impacted the prior year pricing analysis too, given that she had implemented her new model during that evaluation. Olivia considers what to do next, but is overwhelmed with all the considerations that need to be made and asks you, as her trusted friend and colleague, to talk things through with her. A couple things to consider is the timing, that the prior year analysis is already over and prices have been set. Does it really matter? The reserving analysis, that the reserving actuaries rely upon our price loss ratios when establishing their reserves. And if there is an error in the prior year loss ratio, I guess they probably need to know. Materiality, the error in the current data set was deemed to be immaterial. Surely it should be immaterial last year too, right? Resourcing, that her team already worked hard to fix this year's analysis, and the data error is a direct result of her model issue. How could she possibly ask them to return to last year models too? And the reputational risk. If Olivia reveals that her model had an issue that she didn't catch, will that hurt her reputation? Or if she tries to hide the error and somebody uncovers it on their own, what could that do? So finally, what would you advise Olivia to do as her trusted resource and colleague? Be transparent. Good things coming in, rerun last year's model, see if it's material. It can't probably hurt if this year's was immaterial. Just be nice to have that under your belt to know. Go to her manager and explain the issue. Last year's analysis needs to be redone. Determine the materiality on last year's first, be transparent. Going forward, make sure any new models are peer reviewed to catch mistakes. I like that one. Having a peer review and someone tech checking or looking at that could have potentially avoided all these issues. Always share errors with their boss. It is their decision about what to do with that information. That's a pretty good overarching statement for all of our case studies. Quantify material impact of last year's pricing. model should be reviewed more carefully. I think all of these are great. Yeah, going back, you need to know how material it was, and disclosing it to your manager are the most important things that you can do in this situation. Like I said, probably my favorite one that came through is it's their decision about what to do with that information. Getting more ideas is always better, and you want to make sure that those errors don't continue in the future.
Yeah, I think the important thing to remember here too with situations like this is we're all human. Unfortunately, everybody makes mistakes. So, as Alaina had mentioned, it sounded like Olivia was very concerned about what this would do to her reputation and how this would make her look. But I think most reasonable people, hopefully most of us, understand that, again, everybody does make mistakes. So it's always best practice to own up to your mistakes, and just, make sure that you're doing the right thing with that regard.
And similar to some of our other code of conduct notes, in Precept 1, we note that an actuary shall act with honesty, integrity, and competence in a manner to fulfill the profession's responsibility to the public. And also in our Actuarial Standard Practice 43, we talk about materiality in that the actuary may choose to disregard items that in the actuary's professional judgment are not material to the unpaid claim estimate. But it is taking into account the requirements applicable by law and the intended purpose of the unpaid claim estimate is important in doing so.
Yeah, and the main purpose for including that last one, again, she stressed several times, Olivia did, that the error was deemed to be material this year. So of course, surely it had to be immaterial last year. But there's more to consider than just what she thinks is material, or what the materiality threshold is from the reserve analysis. And that's why we've, highlighted and bolded the intended purpose of the unpaid claim estimate. So like Alaina said, if this is feeding into, into the pricing analysis or whatever it may be, something that probably needs to be disclosed, and think further from just what she considers to be materiality here. Great. So with that takes us to the end of our case studies. I know we've only got a couple more minutes here. I think we touched on most of these professionalism resources, at least at some point throughout the presentation, but we'll just run through them very quickly. So I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with the ASOPs, or the Actuarial Standards of Practice, that are issued by the Actuarial Standards Board. A lot of good professionalism content therein, a lot of good guidance in terms of, executing our day-to-day work and how to adhere with these standards. Definitely referenced several times today the Code of Professional Conduct published by the American Academy of Actuaries. Alongside that, we have the U.S. Qualification Standards, also published by the American Academy of Actuaries. I know we talked a little bit about the ABCD, or Actuarial Board for Counseling and Discipline. Definitely a very good resource. Probably a lot of us haven't had to use them or haven't used them, but it sounds like from a couple of people who have that it's been a great resource. So definitely keep that one in mind. And then in terms of the American Academy of Actuaries, a couple more resources from the website, a handful of professionalism discussion papers on the website, and also quite a few professionalism webinar replays that you can access and watch, which are great. Some of them are case studies just like this. All right, so that was it for our presentation. We will open it up. I know we've only got a couple minutes left, but we'll open it up for any questions. And if not, we will give you guys a little bit of an extra long break before your next session.